This is Radio Times. I'm Mary Cummings Jordan, in for Marty Moscowain. The Mount Laurel Doctrine of 1975 is considered to be an historic civil rights case. According to Mount Laurel, municipalities in New Jersey cannot use zoning to exclude housing that would be affordable to low and moderate income residents. In fact, they have to offer a fair share of such housing. But the road to full implementation has been rocky, and it is now in limbo. The Christie administration is stalling on new regulations. The Supreme Court is trying to determine how to react. And in the meantime, housing advocates say tens of thousands of families wait for access to safer neighborhoods and better schools. This is Radio Times. I'm Mary Cummings Jordan, in for Marty Moscowain. And this hour, we're tackling the affordable housing debate in New Jersey. Governor Christie is quoted as calling the historic Mount Laurel decision an abject failure. He's questioning the amount of affordable housing needed, and we're waiting to see what the Supreme Court does next. Joining us in studio is Kevin Walsh, Associate Director of Fair Share Housing Center. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you.
And Jeffrey Serenian is an attorney who represents over 40 municipalities in affordable housing matters. Hello, Jeffrey.
Good morning.
And as always, if you have questions or comments, lines are open at 888-477-9499. And email works too, radiotimes@whyy.org, as does a tweet at whyy.org. Kevin Walsh, first to you. What exactly is the need for affordable housing in New Jersey?
The need is tremendous, and it's comprised of two principal buckets of need. One of which is folks who, as our population expands, need housing, and our projection is that between now and the next 10 or so years, that the need approaches 175,000 units, both looking back and going forward. And then there's nearly 1 million people who pay too much for their housing because they pay more than 30% in the state of New Jersey to afford a place to live, whether it be rent and insurance or a mortgage. And those are folks who exceed the national standard in what they pay. And because of that, they can't afford things like clothes and food, or they have to struggle because they're paying for housing. They have trouble affording life's other necessities. And for a lower income household that pays half or more of its income toward housing, they're going to have trouble making ends meet in other areas.
Is there a typical client? Is it a single person, a family? Describe that.
There are a lot of families who need housing that's affordable. Many of them are led by single mothers. We hear from a lot of folks who are victims of domestic violence. We hear an awful lot from two-parent households who are earning maybe $12 an hour each of them, and still have trouble affording a home in the state. And then there's a lot of people with disabilities. Sometimes folks who develop disabilities, especially later in life, and have to find a place to live. They're some of the folks who have benefited the most from the Mount Laurel Doctrine.
And a move to the suburbs does what?
Especially for families, a move from the suburbs to the suburbs it gives people opportunities, whether it be good schools, proximity to jobs, whether it just be living in a safe area where one doesn't hear gunfire sometimes. Those are the things that we hear that have life-changing impacts on families who have benefited from the promise of Mount Laurel. Kids who aren't afraid to walk to school. Kids who suddenly go to a place where most of the kids go to college. Those are the sorts of things that break cycles of poverty. And as a state and a country, we should look to Mount Laurel for the tremendous success it's had in that area.
Jeffrey Serenian, 40 years since the Mount Laurel Doctrine was implemented, 65,000 new affordable homes built since then. What are the principal difficulties, in your opinion, in implementing Mount Laurel?
Well, the problem is that we need standards with which to comply. And this bottleneck with the deadlock in the Council on Affordable Housing is really a problem, because municipalities have spent an enormous amount of their resources trying to develop plans, and they can't do so in the absence of rules. So as much as the housing advocates are crying for standards, so are municipalities. For the last quarter of a century, since the Council on Affordable Housing has been created, the pattern has been Coah creates the rules, gives municipalities an opportunity to comply with them, and then municipalities devise plans to comply with those rules. So that's really the problem right now. The other problem is that we need numbers that are realistic. To have numbers that are unrealistic doesn't generate more housing. It just generates controversy.
When you mean numbers, are you talking about quotas?
Quotas, yeah. For example, Mr. Walsh just indicated that he's advocated for 175,000 units in the next 10 years. That's 17,500 affordable units a year. If you look at the building permit data statewide, in the last 10 years from 2003 to 2013, when we have data, there's only been 23,000 units of residential housing done statewide. So if you're going to impose quotas that are so over the top, it's not going to generate more housing. It's going to generate more controversy. And what we need is a system that we can coexist, that everyone can buy into, that we can have realistic goals and standards with which to comply.
Kevin Walsh?
Yeah, I think that there's the difficulty with what Jeff says is that there's lots of gimmicks that are built into the law. So you can go and you get 2 for $1 at the can sale. Well, they have those same sorts of gimmicks under the state law, and so a rental unit counts for 2. In New Jersey, when a family can't live in the bonus that they get on top of it. So over the years, because of some of the wealthier suburban resistance, there are a lot of gimmicks that have been put in place. And so the number you start with at 175 gets whittled down, and there's other gimmicks to get it down. Some ways to get it down based on a town not having sewer may be legitimate temporarily. Other gimmicks are just that. And so there's a way in which one needs to aim high in order to, under the law, get it to a place that, that 65,000 units, in order to get that, you needed to have the numbers aiming higher in order to account for the gimmicks.
So you're thinking 175,000, but you would be happy with what?
I'd be happy with 175,000, but I think that there is a lower number that over the next decade would be produced. But there are obligations that were assigned to municipalities in the 80s, and some municipalities are still meeting them. So there's no assumption that the obligation would be fully met in the 10 years. It's just that as the construct that is in place in New Jersey for looking at these policies needs to begin with a big number to end up with probably at the end of the day a significantly smaller number.